Assalamu alaikum and welcome to In Conversation with Taha Ghayyur, Executive Director, Justice for All Canada and Senior VP, Sound Vision. He has travelled all the way from Toronto, Canada to be with us here today. Meet Taha, a dynamic human rights advocate, an inspiring personal growth and leadership trainer, and a talented writer all the way from Toronto, Canada. With an unwavering spirit of service and a burning passion to unlock leadership potential, Taha has been at the forefront of transformative community initiatives for over 2 decades, making waves across North America. Get ready to be inspired by Taha's incredible journey and impactful work. Welcome and Assalamu alaikum, Taha.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for hosting me today. And with that introduction, you have set the bar too high, and there's too much pressure here. I'm not sure about what you just said.
No pressure at all. I mean, I think it's all about what has actually happened in your journey, because your journey is what gives us all what we want to say about you. So really tell us a little bit about who you are, what you've been doing, and really what your next steps are in terms of here in the UK.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, for that, once again, that introduction. Well, I am a product of, some wonderful people, of course, who have gone before us, people who have done great things. And, just like all of us, we are doing our bit to just building on the legacies of wonderful people around us. And we are inspired by so many of those, of our pioneers in our communities, especially for us in Canada. So, yeah, I mean, my journey really started with... at different levels in the Muslim community activism or work, but my work in human rights space started, let's say, about 20 years ago informally when it comes to advocacy efforts involving Muslims in India at the time. And, that was more of an informal thing, but it's been now over 10 years that I've been very formally involved with Justice for All and Burma Task Force.
And there's been some successes with this, obviously, because along the way you've obviously been doing this for 10 years, and you'd hope that there are some. Tell us a little bit about some of the successes that you've had in this field in convincing the Canadian government and other civil society partners to come on board.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So it was in 2012 when we officially sort of started our work on Burma Task Force, which was actually a global coalition, including actually organizations from the UK and, of course, US and Canada, where we wanted to bring attention to Rohingya, the plight of Rohingya genocide, at a time when it was not popular. In fact, nobody knew even how to pronounce the word Rohingya and cared less. Our community masjids, imams, and MPs in Canada and of course even the politicians in the US and even the UK didn't really have any knowledge, nor did they care. In fact, many of them discouraged us from even bothering with, because not very strategic for us to be bothering with a genocide of about a couple of million people. So it took us 5 years of relentless effort, silent advocacy and some loud advocacy, a very small group of people, just a couple of us who were doing that in Canada, where we, alhamdulillah, starting 2018, we started seeing some results. When in the world started hearing about the exodus mass exodus of Rohingya people, that's when we started seeing some results. So Canada became, because of our advocacy for 5 years plus, Canada became the first country in the world to declare what was happening to Rohingya a genocide, number one, which has legal implications. Canada got the Canadian government to send Honorable Bob Rae as a special envoy to Cox's Bazar and to Rohingya refugees to actually do a report on it, which became very instrumental in getting many other very significant actions, passed. In place, that's correct. And then Canada also donated $330 million in aid to Rohingya people, and then a couple of years later, 3 years later, or 4 years later, another $270 million. And for the first time in Canadian history, we got an honorary citizenship revoked, which was of Aung San Suu Kyi. So these are some very significant wins.
It really is, and I think one of the spaces that you've looked at is Canada itself, because it is quite a unique space. I mean, we've had instances, for example, the Sikh community and how they have actually been supported in some ways when the Indian government has been taking actions as well. Have you been involved in any of those kinds of actions?
Of course, we work very collaboratively with many diaspora communities, impacted communities. So for instance, when it comes to our advocacy on India, we work with Indian Christians, we work with Dalits in India, or in Canada, of course, Sikh community, and of course, as well as any others actually who have been persecuted is part of our work. So that being said, yes, of course, we work in solidarity with the Sikh community. Good thing is that they have been very solid advocates of their own cause, and they've been so well organized, and they've done a great job that actually inspires many others out there. So yes, we do of course work with them quite collaboratively. But good thing is that they've shown us the way, in many ways, how to sort of organize, mobilize.
I think that's a really important point in terms of the space within Canada and the civil society space. It seems a very healthy space. It's allowed you to grow in different ways in terms of looking at civil society areas, but also in terms of how you are more involved in politics over there as well. How has the Muslim community benefited from your involvement, I suppose, in these particular areas and these particular fields as well?
Yeah, so when you say your, meaning personally, or just want to confirm?
Your organizations that you work with,
yes,
and how they have actually helped to help mobilize the Muslim community in
Alhamdulillah. I think I would say one good thing is that the Canadian, as you rightly said, it's a unique space in the sense that if you look at the United States and Canada, Canada has the highest concentration of Muslims out of all, or Toronto specifically has the highest concentration of Muslims in one area. So that concentration, very much like actually United Kingdom, gives us, and London specifically, gives you a lot of leverage when it comes to politics and even media and civic engagement and advocacy specifically. And this is where I would say our advantage has been and leverage has been. So just the last federal election, we had 11 self-identifying Muslim MPs who were elected, and over the last decade or so, we have had 4 high-profile ministers in place. So when you have that kind of representation that's happening, then it gives you a lot more possibilities of course, advocacy.
The right networks of trust, the right social capital.
That is correct, yes.
And from that you create the kind of changes and you want. The other point that you also talk about, and the thing that is, I recommend all of our viewers to actually go and see some of the stuff that you've done, is about personal resilience and effectively resilience generally within the Muslim community and within that Muslim space. Talk to us a little bit about that, especially considering the fact that you have a Prime Minister in terms of Justin Trudeau, who's also now having to resign.
Yes.
Issues of personal resilience are quite important as well within the community.
Of course. Yeah, so I do, of course, write quite a bit on personal development and those kinds of topics. That's the other hat of my work with Sound Vision, which is a Muslim professional development and media organization. So of course, that's a big one coming up for us. We saw it coming, but we didn't realize that it's going to be sort of, the way how dramatic it would have been and the consequences are. So I would say that Muslim community is, of course, sort of on the fence at this point because, on the one hand, you have Liberal Party because Muslims have been very much liberal leaning all these years. And liberals have, in general, disappointed Muslims, but also Palestinians and anybody who is anti-genocide because they are seen as complicit, even though they've come a long way. They have had some good, a few good small wins, I would say, from a Palestinian advocacy perspective that we have seen. But just like pretty much all European and Western countries, Canada has been complicit. We are still basically, it's pretty much supplying, arms. I mean, to Israel, even though there was a whole announcement made about it. So we are very much on the fence because then you have NDP, the National Democratic Party, led by Jagmeet Singh, and then you have conservatives. And conservatives have been traditionally not very friendly, immigration friendly, not Muslim friendly. I would say there is a shift happening internally
But what
as well.
about then, this is the other unique thing about Canada as well. You've got this other side. I mean, when I went there, everything is in either English and in French. Because you have this very strong French
Yes.
contingent in relation to
Yes.
where you are within the
Yes,
country.
of course.
So how does that play into the politics of what Canada is about?
Yeah, of course, that does play a significant role because the French world is a very very different world, or the Quebec scene is very different scene, and there are some very unique things that are happening there. This whole idea of sort of secularization, the idea of ensuring that you separate state religion from state is very big in Quebec. So we have Bill 21, which is a highly discriminatory bill that has already basically banned hijab and observance of any religious practice in public forums and public spaces and public workplaces, and that has become a real issue. And I mean, like it's like almost impossible or unthinkable to think about something like that happening today in 2025 in Canada, multicultural society. And they're taking their cues from France and other places. They're learning from some European countries.
In terms of the concentration, this is the point, isn't it? Because the country is one.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to how that voice is then dissipated. Because yes, there's a strong concentration of Muslims in Toronto, but outside of that municipality, how do you make sure that you continue to keep strong in terms of the observance of what you want to observe?
Yeah, so I think what is good thing is that, alhamdulillah, over the last 10 years or so, Canadian Muslim community has become a lot more civically engaged, a lot more lobby and advocacy savvy, and they're realizing that they have agency and they have power to actually make things happen and change things. We have 30 ridings now in the upcoming elections that can potentially swing votes one way or the other, can actually decide, both in Quebec, where discriminatory laws are being played out, and of course in other parts of Canada.
Well, I'd like to take you up on this as well, because then you're here in the UK, and you know that recently we've had an election over here, and there was a strong push for something called the Muslim vote over here.
Yes.
Have you thought about connecting with some of the people in that particular area to give your ideas of what you have been doing in Canada to be able to feed into what they are doing here in the UK?
Yeah, a good point, and I think this is where definitely a lot more collaboration is needed. In fact, I have looked into in the wonderful work that Muslims in UK have been doing for quite some time. I think there's a lot more political maturity now that we can learn from, and yes, that is actually the strategy. That is, we have a similar version of it. It's called Canadian Muslim Vote as well, TCMV, and they are the ones who are identifying not only two things. Number one, where the Muslim concentration and
the chances of winning
exactly. Where do we have basically potentials for wins or leverage? And then second thing is those strategic policy types of conversations that we are having. Right? We had this whole in the U.S. we have punish Biden or abandon Biden campaigns, right? So of course those are kind of types of conversations that are happening right now in Canada as well. And the question of course comes down to is, okay, you want to punish liberals, but then at what cost? And what are your alternatives are? And that's a conversation.
Well, this is an interesting point, because you brought up that, punish Biden, but then all of a sudden we've heard that the president-elect is very much thinking of Canada as the 51st state. Yes. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's quite an outrageous idea to begin with, but you can expect that from somebody like Trump, to be honest. And I think Canadians are not taking it very seriously yet, but you never know. He has done things and said things and done things that nobody has so far. So I mean, we want to make sure that we are, we maintain the sovereignty of Canada, and we want to make sure that we keep fighting for it. But you never know what the American, sort of objectives and dreams are going forward in the new administration.
Yeah, I mean, we don't often get the chance to talk to people about broad issues, but because your area of work is so broad, we can actually open out the conversation a lot more. Because one of the other things that has been quite significant recently has been news of a potential ceasefire in Gaza. And now, obviously, the situation in Gaza has been absolutely diabolical in relation to what we've seen on our screens. In terms of resilience, in terms of where we can see a way forward for the people of Gaza, what is your organisations been thinking about? What have you been thinking about? And what are your thoughts about how we can navigate this space?
Yeah, I think Muslims in general, but as advocates specifically, we need to constantly think beyond ceasefire. Since day one, when October 7th happened, we were thinking about, okay, what would the world be like, and what should Gaza be like, and Palestine be like beyond ceasefire, and importantly, what should the Western governments be doing going forward? So I think this is what we need to be thinking about. So right now, of course, we want to make sure that ceasefire actually happens. Most people are probably not even aware as they woke up this morning that Israel has already killed 80 plus people just basically overnight after the announcement of ceasefire. So you can only imagine how true how
much we can rely on
exactly.
this particular point.
Absolutely, yeah. So we don't know what the implementation of the ceasefire is going to be like, and whether they are going to actually hold true to this pact that we are making here. Basically, it's a social contract, but also a very much global legal contract when you talk about ceasefire. So we cannot keep violating it. So that being said, we want to make sure that Palestinians going forward are going to be protected. We want to make sure that the humanitarian aid, that's what we've been advocating for all this time, that humanitarian corridors and doors are open and pathways are open, that are unfettered for Palestinians going forward. We want to make sure that, very importantly, we talk about what will the UK government and Canadian government and American government going to do to rebuild Gaza, not just by simply throwing aid upon aid on these on genocide survivors, but to ensure that we rebuild their lives through our direct involvement with the genuine leadership of Gaza or people of Gaza, so that we are ensuring that there are proper economic structures and there are proper physical structures that are there for us to rebuild Gaza. So what will be our physical and financial commitment and involvement in co-building Gaza along with with the leadership of Gaza?
One of the things that I mean, that is going to be something that's very strong. I think part of the commitment to the rebuild was that states like Qatar and Egypt were going to be involved in that kind of rebuild project. Yeah. But by the same token, there is also going to be a need for a lot of effectively soft skills that are going to be needed in this process. How do you help people through trauma? How do you help people through these kinds of issues that have come about? The people in Canada, how has the issue of Gaza been dealt with over there in terms of the encampments that we've seen here in the UK and in the US? How have students, how have people's and demonstrations, they've all taken place. In Canada, how has that been? Has there been a uniqueness to how you've approached this?
Absolutely. I mean, very much like the US and Canada in many ways, I would say that the students have always been the front line, and their power, their agency is admirable, and what they've been able to achieve is something that most of us have not been able to do. And interestingly, as you I'm sure aware here as well, the majority of the people who are doing student encampments, leading the charge, and still are leading BDS and all these movements, are actually non-Muslim allies, right? Yeah. They are not Muslims. So this is, I think, what this is the most amazing part of what has happened since October 7th, which is that there is a whole new solidarity movement that has come to light, that has fruition and has matured over the last few months, especially, which I think can help us take our advocacy for Palestinians to the next level, especially once the ceasefire is over. Then we need to be questioning our governments, it not only just being complicit, but also ensure our direct involvement in actually creating, building basically all these opportunities for genocide to happen. And that's the enabling part that we need to actually really tackle.
I think that you pick up on something there that's quite important. 2 points. I think one is having the ability to change the narrative, and then having the agency to actually do it. So really it's through generational kind of uptake of this particular issue. Canada's got now a fairly mature population of immigrant communities that are now taking their place within that particular structure. I know that you also have a conference that you hold every year. It's quite a big one, isn't it? So tell us a little bit about that conference as well, because that must find a space as well.
Yeah, so we have it's basically a cultural space that we have created called Muslim Fest. Muslim Fest happens every year for the past 21 years in Toronto, more specifically Mississauga, Canada, which is where the high concentration of Muslims are. You're talking about 15+% of Muslims there are Muslim. Of Canadians are Muslim in that area. So Muslim Fest is a festival of a celebration of Muslim arts, culture and entertainment, bringing the best from all around the world. Many British artists actually come there since day one to be on that platform, because it's the only platform in the world that actually brings together artists from all over the world, but also empowers young people to find their own talent, and also creates a space for Muslims and our non-Muslim neighbors to come and see the side of Islam that you rarely ever see through comedy, songs and poetry.
The arts.
Like the arts, right? Which is a language that is able to sort of cross all sorts of barriers and all sorts of obstacles to actually send a message across that we are unable to otherwise through the headlines out there. And so alhamdulillah, it's a festival that has grown from barely about 6,000 people first year to now 70,000 people or so that attend this. It's an open air festival. I actually invite you, anybody, to actually come and visit. It's a 3-day festival that happens every summer, outdoor space, supported by all levels of government, and it's an award-winning festival. Something to definitely check out.
I suppose one of the other things, I mean, that's very nice for you to offer me that invitation. I'm taking you up on it.
Of course, absolutely.
But your work here in the UK, you're here in the UK. What are your goals? What are your aims? What do you hope to achieve by being here? And what is the purpose of your trip now?
Yeah, good question. So the purpose of trip was really to just connect with various advocates for actually globally. You know, UK is in a very unique place in many ways, because you are sort of in the middle of the East and the West. You are in
the Meridian line would say that, wouldn't it?
So you are very much, you're very much connected to the Muslim world, and so many amazing sort of, leaders of the Muslim world, of course, come in to the UK for all sorts of gatherings and meetings. And so we were really here for just to really connect with global human rights advocates and leaders, people who have done things behind the scenes, especially in influencing other countries around the world to actually do something about the human rights policies.
I suppose there's one thing, I mean, there is this, obviously there's a campaign recently that's been taken up over here in the UK as well with Afia Siddiqui. Yep. Maybe not one that you're directly involved in, but there has been a real show of support and bringing together of different communities on that campaign as well.
Amazing. And that's the kind of stuff we need more. Really the local direct mobilizing on specific issues that matter to us and that should matter to us, because they're human issues, they're human rights issues, and it's really commendable work that I've seen especially in the UK and of course United States as well, that is happening, and we need to do more of it for sure.
And if you was a final passing thought in relation to the work that you do and what you see the world, give us a positive outlook of what exactly we can think about going forward.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I would say that, especially to young friends, young brothers and sisters who are very much seeing a very gloomy picture, I want us to remember that this is a long game. Advocating for the rights of anybody who is going through a difficult time, or and a genocide in particular, it's a whole narrative shift that is required. It's a generational shift, and it is a multi-generational project. I may not see Gaza free or Palestine free today, but inshallah, I'm hoping that, in my lifetime I would see it. But if not, then my next generation of Canadian Muslims, UK Muslims will see it. So I think we need to be really, really focused on the long game and do not be obsessed about small and celebrate small wins, but do not be obsessed about the final outcome, because God is the one who controls the world. We don't know, and nobody knows what may happen tomorrow. Nobody saw the ceasefire coming, even though we've been fighting for it for years. Allah has timing. Do not question God's timings, and stay focused. Indeed. And be productive and be consistent, because unfortunately in this world of social media today, especially young folks are looking for instant gratification, and they're just this whole idea that I need to see results now, and I'm the only one who's going to actually make change. It's something that's we are working together, and we will see inshallah results when Allah wants it.
Taha Ghayyur, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely enlightening, and we will see you again on In Conversation.
Thank you.